your source for all things business, technology, strategy, and change. If you're growing your business, leading change within your organization, or undertaking any sort of operational or technology change initiative, this podcast is for you. This show covers what you need to know about digital transformation, organizational change, operational improvement, and business growth.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
Hello and welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 64. Thanks for joining us here today. We have an exciting episode here with Cheatham. Kyler, thanks for being here.
Happy to.
So we've got another good episode, a lot of really interesting stuff we're going to cover today. We're going to start off with some hot topics and fun stuff in the industry or happening in the industry right now. We'll talk about the non-monetary benefits of artificial intelligence. So we'll get into some of the upside and ROI components of artificial intelligence. We'll talk about the misunderstanding behind the Great Resignation. So we've heard a lot about the Great Resignation and some of the displacement happening in the labor market right now, but there's also a fair amount of misunderstanding of what that means. So we're going to dive into that a bit in our hot topic segment. We're also going to talk about digital transformations happening in the African region, in Rwanda in particular. So we'll talk about some trends and movement that we're seeing in that part of the world. We're going to talk about flexible supply chain management platforms and how the market is pushing for more flexibility in supply chain management technologies. We're going to talk about the use of AI in entertainment, as well as the growth of GovTech in the global space. So if you're in the government or the in the public sector, I should say, then you will find that topic interesting. So that's the hot topic stuff we're going to cover in the first opening segment. And then later in the show, we're going to have Theresa Richardson, who is a director of strategy and transformation at Third Stage Consulting. She's going to be on the show talking about artificial intelligence and change management and how those two things go together, two seemingly very different disciplines, one being data driven and very technical on the AI side, converging with the soft side of change, which is oftentimes nebulous and hard to figure out and hard to navigate. It's based on human interactions, which is always difficult or challenging or unpredictable at best. So we're going to talk about how AI and change management are coming together and how they're converging in recent years and where that's headed in the future. So that should be a really interesting conversation later today. And then the third segment we have will be with Kyler and Adam Cheatham talking about project leadership within digital transformation. So if you're a leader on a project or you want to inspire other leaders within your transformation team, that'll be a good topic for discussion here today. But before we jump into all that good stuff, there's a lot that we're going to cover here today. Let's get to some of these hot topics. What have you got for us, Kyler?
Yeah, so first I want to talk about the non-monetary benefits of AI. Obviously we know that having that data assets that AI produces a lot of times achieves ROI goals, which are more of a data-based product. But actually, MIT Sloan Management recently did a review of how AI enhances corporate culture, and they listed 3 things that it actually improved. So it improved efficiency, decision making, and then better collaboration with teams. So I wanted to ask you the better collaboration with teams. How can you give us an example of how AI might do that? Because that's the one piece that I don't know that I understood. And a lot of this episode is spent on kind of defining what AI is. So I wondered if you could give us kind of an example of what that might mean as far as corporate collaboration and communication.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I guess with AI, allowing organizations to have, first of all, better visibility to data. I guess if you sort of back up away from the details of what AI is or how it works, if we just sort of look at what at its fundamental level, what's happening is you have more transparency across an organization to data. And so to the extent that AI can enable that further and enable that greater visibility and greater meaning to the data that organizations have, then there's a lot of focus that can be directed at that sort of top result of what AI is driving towards, or what the data is telling you, is going to happen in the future, or whether you're talking about different components of people's jobs that they're going to do better or more effectively, whatever the case may be. AI is providing that data that will allow organizations to have that sort of focus. So I think that's probably at its most fundamental level. Maybe a very broad example is just having that visibility to the data
Right.
enterprise-wide, which allows the teams to collaborate and focus on making use of that data and solving whatever problem it is that they're trying to solve with that data.
Absolutely. And I think the understanding piece is so important there. Of a lot of times that can kind of resurrect areas of the organization that you didn't realize had the opportunity to collaborate, right? Without that data, how does the supply chain management affect the sales process? And having that full visibility, as you mentioned, can showcase, oh, well, maybe we can change the sales process because we have supply chain challenges, and there's opportunities to optimize the business and understand that because of the AI product and data storytelling that we see. So
Right.
definitely that's a great example. Speaking of supply chain, we are talking about supply chain systems and kind of the call in the industry for additional flexibility. And I'm really interested to have your feedback on that. So we talk about kind of flexible semiconductor platforms, basically bringing all of the traditional supply chain analytics into meeting a design dynamic. So more of an ability to consider, how does the product design go into that? This research I did gave an example of the construction industry. A lot of times the construction industry had the ability to get lumber pre-cut, and with supply chain challenges globally right now, they're having to actually cut the lumber to construct a house as opposed to being able to do that. So there's a need in that technology space to have that design dynamic. And I wondered, being an industry thought leader and having a pulse on supply chain, and the great episode of Ground Control last week where you discussed supply chain evolution in detail, do you feel like this new wave of creativity in actual technical platforms for supply chain is something that we will continue to see, or is this kind of just a one fluctuation within a trend because of a global shortage at this point?
No, I think it's just probably going to be accelerating a trend that was already in place. I think that
Mhm.
we were moving towards a need to have more flexibility and more integration of supply chains back upstream, back to the product design phase, and really tying together everything in between. So I think it's really just accelerating what was already going to happen. It's just giving us more of a burning platform of we need to do it now because supply chains are broken. Hopefully, I don't think, but hopefully people won't revert back, to the previous ways prior to the pandemic. But that would be my prediction for where we're headed.
And so, Eric, we know that a lot of times software vendors will kind of lag behind trends within the industry. Is there a way to accelerate kind of those research and development testings of systems, overall, technical pieces that go into software development? Can they do that faster? Is that even possible?
I think they can, but I'd say the bigger concern or challenge is that there's so much capability that organizations haven't taken advantage of that already exist. So I think the vendors are. I'm not that worried about the software vendors. They're usually pretty far ahead of where most mainstream organizations are anyway. I worry more about organizations and their ability to catch up or keep up with where the vendors are headed. But having said that, I mean, there's no reason they couldn't speed it up. I mean, their software vendors are focused so much on agile development and really just
Hmm.
cranking out R&D and just cranking out new capabilities into the technologies. It's more, can organizations keep up is more the question.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a totally flipped perspective than I had. I thought organizations would kind of go a little faster than the vendors and create that demand, but it sounds like that's actually flipped.
Yeah, in my opinion, it is. I think organizations are usually going to move a lot slower than the software vendors can, not because they want to or they don't want to adopt technology, but it just because the vendors technology changes faster than people is probably the
Yeah,
best way to say it.
absolutely. And I know you and Theresa will kind of get into that a little later in this episode, so definitely stay tuned for that. Speaking of slow-moving industries, we have this kind of march towards GovTech globally as the COVID-19 pandemic really forced that transformation to take place because we couldn't do a lot in person. So there's been a huge shift globally, and a recent study kind of showcased there's a lot of great examples of how government platforms have utilized technology to do some of their basic services. Um, for example, Estonia has managed to make 99% of government services available online. Their X-Road platform connects the information systems from the public sector to various private sector opportunities and providers. So they've leveraged that ability to embrace technology within their overall services. So I wanted to kind of get your reaction to this government new technology, because we all know, at least here in the United States, if in my experience in working for the government, they can be very slow to embrace new technologies. So is that an industry or an example of a perception and overall culture that will totally flip as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I hadn't really thought of that. I would think so. I think a lot of these changes we're seeing will probably stick, but then again, there's other things that I've been wrong about or that a lot of us couldn't predict. Like for example, even though it has nothing to do with what you just asked me, technology wise, but I'm fascinated by how something as simple as like the handshake.
Yeah.
I remember people saying like people wouldn't shake hands anymore after the pandemic. We sort of learned that you shouldn't do that, and we're going to get used to not shaking hands and doing fist bumps or elbow bumps or whatever instead, or chest bumps in the case of my young kids. But but yet handshakes are back, and I've been traveling a lot over the last several
Mhm.
months. It's amazing to me that I rarely meet anyone now that isn't
Yeah.
embracing the handshake. So anyway, I could be wrong. Maybe we go back to our old ways because that's just how we are. But I guess I'll be curious as well to see to where that goes in the government space. But I do know that's a very real trend. Governments are trying to automate more and more and get caught up with the rest of the private sector as well.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that it's experienced that transformation on both sides of the organization, right? Both internally, as a lot of governments were the first to go completely remote, and a lot of times the last to go back to more hybrid model. And then also externally, with the customer, quote unquote, the constituent, the citizens, and their ability to access government services that are required by some sort of policy. So for me, that's really interesting is it flipped on both ways, is it was traditionally, at least here in the United States, all in person, as opposed to any sort of opportunity to utilize technology to make those transactions happen from a citizen's perspective, leveraging technology or a platform of such. And it seems as though a lot of these GovTech platforms are really popping up globally to be able to service the public sector specifically.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
Speaking of some global innovations, I wanted to talk specifically about Rwanda and their goals to innovate kind of their information technology through looking to the space industry. So it looks to contribute 10% of GDP in the next decade, as opposed to doing 3% right now, and launch thousands of satellites by 2023. And this movement, obviously, as we know, in working in the Africa space, is going to triple the contributions of communications and connectivity in the region over the next decade. So looking at that as space as an opportunity to create connectivity, I thought was a very interesting strategy, because a lot of times we see with our Eastern African marketplace that connectivity and systems can be a big barrier to any sort of digital transformation or IT project development. So I wanted to just get your reaction to that, and knowing that you've worked to build out our Africa office, which we have now in Cape Town, South Africa, and our regional teams, to see if you think that this connectivity and rush towards that will be continued, a continued trend within that specific marketplace.
Yeah, it is what we're seeing there. I think in a lot of industries, we're just seeing a lot of advancements in technology and a lot of accelerating adoption of technologies, at a faster pace in Africa than some other parts of the world as well. So yeah, absolutely. I think that is something that we're seeing more of.
Absolutely. And I know our team there has a really specific skill set in servicing these types of clients within the Africa and global market. So it'll definitely be something that I'll be excited to continue to see the progress and just understand the nuances of helping clients in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's an exciting region to be consulting in for sure. And that's part of what's so exciting about our office there.
Yeah, absolutely. And a great team there. If you haven't checked out Clifford Martin, he's the head of our Africa office. He was ground control a few weeks ago, so definitely check that out. You can search the function wherever you get your podcasts for just Africa and see all of our content there. But switching gears pretty significantly. So for any of our Top Gun fans out there, Top Gun obviously is one of the most popular movies in history here in the United States, and just came out with a sequel. So if you remember Val Kilmer in that role, he actually in the movie utilized AI to actually speak. He was diagnosed about a decade ago with throat cancer and actually speaks with a voice box. And they created a platform within the Top Gun Maverick, which is the sequel. And he partnered with a tech company to actually have artificial intelligence copy his voice and actually sound like he can speak. So he's been a main proponent in any sort of speech challenged folks within that area to utilize this new technology to actually be creative and be able to communicate. So I'm going to read you a quote, and I just want kind of your feedback on it from him. And he said, "People around me struggle to understand me when I'm talking, but despite all that, I still feel as I am the exact same person, still the same creative soul, a soul that dreams of ideas and stories constantly. But now I can express myself again and bring those dreams to you, show you this part of myself once more, a part that was never truly gone, just hiding away." So I thought that was a really kind of beautiful way to express how technology can really embrace the creativity of someone that isn't able to express it verbally. So I thought, as a big music fan, big entertainment fan, I would get your take on that.
Yeah, I think that's super cool. I had no idea that they had done that, and I didn't know the backstory of Val Kilmer or Iceman. Isn't that the character? Is that the character he is in Top Gun? Is it Iceman, or is that his name?
No, I
Iceman?
think it's Goose, right?
Oh, I
No.
thought Goose is the one that died. Wasn't Goose the one that died in the first
Yeah.
Top Gun?
Yeah.
I feel
Sorry.
like I might have taken us down a rabbit hole that
Yeah,
is
right.
outside the scope of control. But it's all about flying in space, and
Yeah.
it all sort of ties together maybe in some way. But no, that's super cool. I think it actually reminded me of when you were talking about Val Kilmer and the use of AI to enhance his voice. It reminds me of how I got duped on TikTok recently. We have TikTok channels now, and so I researched to see what other influencers are doing on TikTok, and somehow this Tom Cruise account showed up in my feed, and the TikTok handle is called Deep Tom Cruise, and it is Tom Cruise. I mean, it's Tom Cruise doing these funny things, and I really like this channel, but then I realized, that somehow I found out it's not really Tom Cruise. It's like an AI enhanced version. And I think Tom Cruise is like an investor in the company, or he's somehow affiliated with the
Oh,
company, and
okay.
he gave them permission to create this TikTok account where some
Wow.
actors act like him, but the AI is amazing. Like it looks, and in fact, after I learned this, I went back to watch the videos again, and I could not tell that it wasn't Tom Cruise, even though I knew it wasn't. And now I know it's AI, facial recognition and stuff. And so it's just coincidental that Tom Cruise, also being in Top Gun, recently duped me on TikTok. But it's another example though of how AI and all these different technologies are converging to create all these different use cases. And I'm also curious too, like how it how just content creation, how it can enhance and enable more longevity in certain types of content as well. Like in that example of being able to enhance someone who's deteriorated or the voice is deteriorated, now you're able to create more of a legacy, or to capture some of that content that you wouldn't have otherwise captured. So I think it's super cool and super interesting.
Absolutely. Well, I'll have to check out that channel. But yeah, just Eric is on TikTok with his personal account. We do have a brand TikTok, and definitely I will go investigate the AI Tom Cruise.
Yeah,
So
deep Tom Cruise on
yeah,
TikTok. If you check it out,
interesting.
it's great. Yeah.
Well, on kind of that trending shift, I wanted to kind of end our hot topics with this really interesting concept around the Great Resignation, and how it has affected the workforce. Obviously, we've seen this huge shift in people leaving their jobs or moving to a different industry or anything like that. And I think it's a good reminder that many people were forced into that transition, and a lot of innovation has been built from that. So especially when it comes to women, a lot were forced to leave their workforce because they had to educate their children during the pandemic. And that's just what we saw as being parents in general. In having to move to a remote learning and supporting that and figuring out how to be able to do your job, or if your job is in person, to leave the workforce. And the Great Resignation a lot of times looks like it was a choice for some people, but it wasn't for others. But I think the positive shift in this research showcases that there has been, a huge boom in small businesses, that allows the employee the power to kind of create their role, as opposed to going into more of a typical job function. So a lot of times this research is trying to position it as an opportunity for organizations to kind of meet the employee in the middle, or meet the customer in the middle, when it comes to how they interact internally and externally, before and after this disruption. So I wanted to get your feedback on this, Eric, to see kind of in the opportunity lens of kind of leveraging the employee's desire for what their role will look like, in understanding just the socioeconomic and cultural shifts after the COVID-19 pandemic. Is this really an opportunity for organizations to better enhance their culture and understand what their employees' needs are, as opposed to just losing a huge amount of their resources and workforce?
Yeah, that's deep. That's a deep
It is
question.
kinda deep. That's why I wanted to end with it, because I'm like, I don't know really where this will go after. But
All right. Yeah, I think, wow, that's a super interesting thought that I hadn't put a whole lot of thought into. But yeah, I do think that, I'll be curious to see what, where this lands, as far as the, obviously people's lives have been disrupted and work lives have been disrupted, and how is the dust going to settle? I think the dust is settling right now in terms of
Mhm.
what's organizational life going to look like in the future. And I think a lot of organizations are still trying to figure that out. But I think, it is a good, reminder that, a few things. I mean, one is that it's very difficult to build and preserve a really strong culture entirely remotely, or entirely physically distanced. I think at some point, you kind of have to settle back in the middle somewhere, where you do have that human interaction and the face-to-face communication and interactions and all that stuff. But as far as as far as other as far as the culture is being built, I think a lot of organizations have forgotten and now need to remind themselves that they do need to focus on building that culture and focusing on that. So those are just some thoughts that come to mind, but it's a really interesting question. And I didn't realize, and I guess I had heard or seen anecdotal examples or stories that so many people had left for other reasons, not just because they got fed up with their
Right.
job and decided they wanted to quit. A lot of times it was just life situations. They had to, they didn't
Yeah.
have much of a choice.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting trend.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a misunderstood trend sometimes because it's not that they're simply quitting to find a different job. It's because they're quitting because they have to reprioritize, if you will. So, and it's also a really interesting perspective of maybe offering that remote option is building company culture. So we'll have to see how that goes. But back to your handshake example, there is a level of human face-to-face interaction that we, I think, just as overall human beings need to engage in, just from a comfort level standpoint and just a purpose standpoint. So it'll be interesting to see, like, do we see this huge shift in more autonomy for middle management and less like structured policy and more individual employee focused policy? Or is it something, that we have to understand the crave and the desire for face-to-face interaction as well?
Yeah.
So it's different. It's interesting, and I don't envy large organizations that do usually standardize their policies, and trying to figure out and navigate this different world of shifting workforce. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That'll be an interesting to see where that trend goes, and that actually sort of ties into our
yeah,
first guest that we'll have on with Theresa, when we talk about workforces and transitioning workforces. We're actually going to talk about change management and artificial intelligence and how those two seemingly disparate disciplines are coming together to create an interesting conversion of data-driven technology like artificial intelligence, combining forces with human-centric, unpredictable disciplines like change management. And so how do those two things to come together? And that's what we're going to talk about with Theresa Richardson when we come back from a quick break. We'll have Theresa on. She'll talk about the convergence of AI and change management. But first, we'll take a quick break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the 2021 Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how to take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 64. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Kyler Cheatham. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, as well as all of the audio podcast platforms out there in the marketplace. So if you're on Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, Google Podcasts, or whatever platform you listen to podcasts, be sure to check us out there. I'm excited for our next guest, who is someone that is recently promoted to director level at Third Stage Consulting in our U.S. office. She's been on the show before talking about change management type stuff, but never change management in the context of artificial intelligence, as we're going to do today. So with all that being said, Theresa, welcome to the show.
The whole sink or swim thing began back in my days in manufacturing. When I lived in Michigan, I worked with several of the big three automotive manufacturing. So my journey to change management has started out organically, meaning I started out with a really hard methodology. I did lean manufacturing, smart manufacturing, Lean Six Sigma, et cetera. Within those methodologies, it became quite apparent to me that if you don't have the team that is buying into what you're doing, you're going to fall flat on your face. So understanding how to really get the team around what I'm doing and having them being part of the conversation for the solution and having them be part of the action planning and the execution is very important. And honestly, that's how my change management journey began. I'm a certified ProSci change management practitioner, and I've had years and years of experience within change in many industries, again, from automotive to healthcare, IT, logistics, tech, etc. So I cannot underscore how important it is to get the teams engaged in what you're doing, especially if I've said it probably 2,000 times now. If unless your process is 99.9% automated, you're going to have people involved. Yeah.
Right.
So,
and that's again why this topic's so interesting, because in some cases you are automating people's jobs. So how does that affect, how does that affect it and that sort of thing? That's part of what we'll get to here today. But I guess before we dive into those details, though, I guess just to start, just real basic, fundamental sort of overview 101 response here to, let's cover AI and change management individually, and then we'll kind of come back to how it all comes together. How does change management, the people side of change, converge with the AI technologies that are available out there? But to start, just tell us a little bit about what exactly is artificial intelligence. I know we've all probably heard the term, but a lot of us may not fully understand what that really means.
Sure. So AI really, what it is it's a field that combines computer science and our database sets together to help make problem solving easier. You can interpret the data, you can learn from it using AI, and then you can use it to help you achieve certain goals. I would also like to say that this field is exploding. So the global artificial intelligence market right now is valued at $62 billion in 2020. And it's expected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 42% from 2021 to 2028. So it's really, really important to be able to get in front of that and understand what artificial intelligence is. You have artificial intelligence, you have machine learning, you have deep learning. So, someone who is not a data scientist or doesn't have their fingers or on the pulse of what AI is, you really need to get ahead of that curve because it's coming. And I know we've had a brief conversation about this wave that's coming, and we need to be prepared because people instinctually don't like change to begin with. They don't like it. So when you add the extra layer of an artificial intelligence system coming into your workplace, your organization to make things more efficient, to have a better understanding of your data sets, et cetera, that's going to even make the issue worse. So if you don't get ahead of it now and understand the growth rate, understand what it is, understand how it can help your teams instead of having the fear grow in your teams and thinking it's going to hinder them or even worse, replace them, right? It's going to make the journey for your change practitioners or your change activities even harder.
Right. Okay. So then just to maybe help us understand, so that's a little bit about AI, but what about change management as a discipline? Just how do you simplify that, or just sort of give us an introductory overview of what exactly it is?
So change management really is the people side of your change. It's understanding how your teams are looking at the problem ahead of you. So when you look at a change management initiative or a definition of it, you really need to focus on the people aspect of that activity. So it's communication, it's training, it's learning, it's having them part of the current state analysis and having them part of the solution for the future state analysis or the future state initiative. And again, if you want to sum it up into like one sentence, change management is the people side of change and how you're going to help facilitate your teams to go from current state as is to future state with high adoption and usage rates.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good, I like that one sentence way you described that there. That is a great way to view it. So, so that's a good overview to start, sort of the two pieces we're talking about here today, the AI piece and then the change management piece. So if we sort of come back to AI then, and let's kind of hone in on that for a second, just looking at AI and then how change management enables AI, or why change management is so important to AI. What are some of the major impacts that AI typically would have on an organization, and then the resulting impact on people in particular? So in other words, why is change management so important for AI? You know, what are those impacts?
So let's just take an example of a project manager. So how much time does a project manager really spend with those mundane tasks of updating, their spreadsheets, looking at Gantt charts, et cetera, et cetera? A lot, right? Like 15, 20% of their time, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. With an AI, you could actually have those things automated. You could have triggers in there that would alert you that you're behind your project. You could have like a PM bot or whatever you want to call it, go in there and monitor your statistics, monitor your KPIs, making sure you're on task and target, making sure you're on budget, alerting you of things coming, like, okay, hey, this is coming up, or you're getting too close to your target if you want to below it. So AI really helps to use the data sets that you have to become more efficient in what you do. So, I liken it back to like my Lean Six Sigma. You have value-added tasks and you have non-value-added tasks. Value-added tasks are what the customer is going to pay you. So I believe that AI can help you take over those non-value-added tasks so you can be more productive in what your skill set really calls for. If you're a PM and you're spending 20% or 15% of your time, doing these mundane tasks, that's 20% of your time you could be using for something within your realm of responsibility.
Right. So that project manager task is a good example, or that project manager role is a good
Absolutely.
example of how AI can affect, say, 15 to 20% of your job. It's been, being automated, or at least you have a tool set that can help you automate that job.
Absolutely. And honestly, AI can help you with your data analytics, predictive analytics. I don't think people use predictive analytics as much as they should, meaning that they're able to take your data set and help you to see the impact of one avenue versus the other. Predictive analytics to highlight areas of a concern. You could use your change bot, if you will. And I've done some reading and I've seen that term out there to help identify those opportunities, suggest some corrective actions, which honestly will have a quicker or better impact to your ROI. Like, you spend a lot of time doing data analytics and looking at your usage rates and your adoption rates, et cetera, et cetera. Imagine a world where that information is quickly populated from a change bot or whatever AI term you want to use, and it's right at your fingertips. So instead of you having to go out and research and get this information, it's right at your fingertips, so you can make decisions quicker, which would have a better impact to your ROI. You can use the AI to help when you're looking at digital adoption platforms. You can help with training, you can help with onboarding, you can get your metrics sooner, you can get all this information again at your fingertips. And like I said, back to the project management example, taking your skill set and being able to use a larger portion of the skill set towards the activity versus mundane tasks is going to be huge for not even productivity, but for results.
Right. Gotcha. So I guess then that, you've talked about ways that AI can help an organization, but at the end of the day, it's automating part of, or replacing part of people's jobs in some way, oftentimes, which I would imagine would create a certain amount of fear and trepidation and resistance to change, because I don't as cool as it sounds to have that chat bot or that change bot you're talking about, or that that bot that can help me project manage better and give me inputs. I still might worry that you're taking away the value that I bring because I manually do that, or I've got something in my head that I typically would have done in the past that's now being done by AI technology. How does AI, how do you see it affecting resistance to change? And what are some of the best ways to overcome that perceived fear, which I think is a bit different for AI than even other types of technologies we've seen over the years?
Well, I think this adds another layer of what if, or how does this impact me? And that always comes back to a lack of understanding. So, in my opinion, people don't go to work to do a bad job. They want to be part of a solution. They want to be part of something exciting and something of growth, right? They want to put their fingerprints on what they're doing because it brings a sense of fulfillment, right? So if you're spending your time, 20% of your time or so, on mundane tasks, how is that really speaking to your desire of wanting to be part of something good, right? So whenever you look at any change management initiative, you have to understand why we're not embracing this. And a lot of times it has to do with the fear of the unknown. I don't understand. How is this going to impact my job? I know a lot of the projects that I've worked on, you have a lot of workarounds that people spend a lot of time building, and they don't want to give it up. They don't want to get out of their comfort zone. But if you are able to show the benefits of using this technology to your benefit, like, hey, Eric, I know you spend an X amount of time doing these administrative tasks or what have you. What would you feel about us being able to automate that so you can take on another project, or you can start building another skill set, so your value add increases and your non-value add decreases, right? So I think being able to have the conversation with teams to understand what is your view on AI? What other things would you like to learn or be part of to replace that 20% of non-value added activity to help your career, to help growth? I think AI is going to allow us to do things that, it's out of our comfort zone. But being out of your comfort zone doesn't mean it's a bad thing. You could learn a different part of the business. You could learn a different skill set. You could learn things that will bring more fulfillment to your role in the company. It doesn't have to be a bad thing if you explain the benefit and if you have a conversation with your teams. I think a lot of times companies don't have those conversations. They don't explain it. They don't show the benefit up front, even before it's coming. They're just like, oh, here it is. Here's your, here it is on your desk. Yay for you. We're going to love change. It's like, wait a second. Why don't we understand how our organization is feeling? Why don't we show them, give them examples, give them information so they can, absorb it and ask questions. I think that when you don't ask the questions, it doesn't show that mutual respect companies are wanting in their culture, right? It's a two-way street. If you want me to do something, I need to understand why. I need to understand how it's going to benefit me. How is it going to benefit my job? People spend a lot of times at their jobs. They're sacrificing times with their family and with their outside interests. So we have to make sure what we're doing is understood and seen as a benefit than a hindrance in the company.
Right. Yeah.
In a nutshell. I could talk about this all day.
Yeah. Well, it's a cool topic. I mean, it's really interesting, and it's okay. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation of change management and AI when we return from a quick break on Transformation Ground Control. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling, the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we recently hosted our Digital Stratosphere 2022 virtual event. It's 3 days of packed content related to digital transformation best practices, about 16 or 18 different workshops and different speakers that are presenting on different topics, everything you need to know about transformation. The bad news is if you missed that event, the event's over. The live event already happened. But the good news, if you've missed it, or even if you did attend it and you want to see replays or you want to catch the sessions you missed,
You can do that now by going to stratosphere2022.com. Go to stratosphere2022.com, register. All you have to do is put in your name and email address, just a few fields. You get immediate access to all the recordings. And the recordings cover everything from digital strategy, software selection, organizational change, process improvement, architecture, data migration, cloud, trends in the industry, how to avoid failure, some of the legal aspects to think about, contractual aspects to think about as it relates to your transformation. All that is stuff that you'll get by registering for Stratosphere 2022 Replay. And again, go to stratosphere2022.com and you can listen to all the replays of all the workshops that you might have missed at the event. So hope you check it out, and thanks for listening. We'll see you soon. Fire to the bone.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 64. We're here with Theresa talking about the role of AI and change management and how those two disciplines are coming together. It's also, it's as cool as it is and as much of a positive thing that it is in many cases in terms of how AI can help an individual do their jobs better and help the organization. I think, there's a lot of great examples of how AI can help. But at the same time, I think there's a sort of underlying fear similar to what people, back in the 80s, it seems like back in the 80s, it started a bit where people had this fear of robotics taking over their jobs, taking over manual labor type jobs. Now AI is another perceived threat. Is it going to take away my job entirely? Might be an underlying concern that people have. Maybe right now, maybe not right now, maybe not just by helping me automate 15 to 20% of my job so I can develop in other ways. But, it might be greater than that. So I guess, how big do you see resistance to AI being, from a people perspective?
So I think what you said is really interesting, though, and I'd like to dive into that, right? So you stated that back in the 80s, there was a fear of X, Y, and Z, right? It's all how you poise the conversation. If you start out with that fear factor, the unknown, that, that scary monster under your bed, yeah, the first seed that gets dropped in my head is fear, resistance, hesitation, et cetera, et cetera. I know they have this old adage, like, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never, whatever. That's not true.
Yeah.
Words really put, ideas in your head. And if we're able to craft the message of positivity, of growth, of abundance, of improvement, you're going to replace a lot of that fear building that's been happening over the past, 30 decades or something, or it was 1980. I don't want to count because that'll age me, but whatever.
Four-ish decades.
Sure. But there's a lot to said about messaging, right? A lot to be said about messaging and tone, inflection, et cetera, and how you roll something out versus, I heard, so what is the reality of the situation? How is this going to help me? What is the proof versus what I heard or the rumor or whatever? Because that's how resistance begins. I'm an employee. I heard this, I heard that. I have no evidence to suggest otherwise, except for my trusted coworker who heard from his brother's sister's girlfriend's uncle's friend. You know what I mean? So if we can get around those types of messages and communications and get ahead of the curve, that's why I really want to talk about this and get it out there, because this industry is coming no matter what. So it is our responsibilities as professionals and as, consultants or whomever, whatever title you want to say, to get ahead of that, to understand, what does it mean? How is it going to impact our organization? What are the benefits? How do we get people to embrace this versus, the message of, I heard my uncle's cousin's lost his job because of AI. It's like, well, wait a minute. What about improving your skill set? What about possibly, expanding your role? What are the benefits of AI? So you're not spending X amount of your time in non-value added work. I would even say, tell me what you don't like about your job. Even before this comes out, let's do a survey. What don't you like about your job, Eric? You're a PM. Tell me. I don't like that I spend so much time on my Gantt charts. I don't like to have to go digging for data. I don't like having data that doesn't match up because, I don't trust the databases because we have work, so all of these all of these points of confusion or of pain, we need to address that. Okay, well, Eric, I heard what you said. You don't like spending 20% of your week on this. Did you know that AI can help eliminate that? So now you have only 5%. So what are you going to do with the other 15? What do you want to do, Eric? Oh, well, I would really like to learn this skill set. Okay, well, let's try to get that done. So you have to replace that fear factor with something positive so you can create that willingness to hear me. Like if I don't communicate well, you're going to shut me down. You're not going to hear anything past, hi, Eric, I want to talk to you. That's it. I'm done. You'll doodle, you'll look in the sky, you'll whatever. So I need to break that barrier so you can hear my message. And you're not going to hear my message until I respect you enough to listen. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. And it also strikes me that this is why, or part of why organizational design is so important, is because in order to that conversation you just described, as far as what I like best about my job, what I like least, what I could be doing, and sort of what my possible role could look like going forward. I mean, you're sort of getting into the guts of organizational design, and that's just defining what someone's job, their roles and responsibilities are going to be in the new post-transformation world after deploying whatever technology, in this case, AI. So I think, in the example of the project manager, really honing in on what that 15 to 20% of their job that's going to be somewhat automated or partially automated by AI, defining what that's going to look like and how they're going to do their jobs, what skills they need, how we're going to upskill that person or, develop them in the way they need to support that technology. I think that's a part that a lot of people overlook. They just think, well, we're going to put the technology in and people are going to adopt it because it's great and awesome. It's going to help the company.
Absolutely.
It's not quite that simple from what you're saying.
It's not, but I like the way you brought that other piece of organizational design in it because, here at Third Stage, we see the whole picture, right? It's not just a transformation or an ERP selection, or it really is the holistic view of how these pieces kind of fit together. And our expertise allows us to see that picture, right? We're not saying organizations are, but we don't have that tunnel vision of, oh, this is what I need in that. There are other impacts and they really build upon each other. If you want to have a well-tuned organization, there are a multitude of facets that you need to address. And then with you selecting an ERP or you selecting an MES or whatever technology you're looking for, there are other pieces you really need to consider to roll that out successfully. Like I say it all the time, we can either do it the right way or we can do it right now. What is it you want to do? Because they're two different avenues, two different consequences. If you want to be, have your tunnel vision, I want to do it right now, I don't care, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well then these are the other things. I'm just letting you know, these are the other things that could be impacted. If you want to do it the right way and be successful and have, your usage, your adoption rates up, lower defects, better customer service, better product. These are the things you have to address. The organizational design, the assessment, the change management piece, and you roll AI on top of all of that. How do we really bring all of that into fruition to be successful versus doing it right now? So again, every decision a company makes, it impacts their ROI. It doesn't matter. Like, this avenue or that avenue, what's going to be my impact? Because at the end of the day, it's about dollars. It's about providing a service, providing a product, making sure our teams are taken care of so they can really give the best performance or the best effort to creating a successful organization. And if you're not looking at all those pieces, you're going to miss something. And then put AI on top of all that. What are we doing?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to turn to the audience here real quickly. There's first of all, thank you for all the feedback on where you're from today. So a lot of you commented on where you're joining from. So we have Dennis from India. Thanks for joining all the way from India at late at night your time. Denver, Colorado, Parker, Colorado, Dallas, Texas, Glasgow in Scotland, Tunisia, France, Toronto, India, a lot of different places people are joining from today all over the world. So thanks for everyone for being here. And again, if you have questions that you'd like to ask Theresa or I, please feel free to drop those in the chat and we'll get to those. We'll start to get to some of the questions that are coming in here.
Well, I'm from Washington and it's gray outside.
Oh, that's right. You're in Washington. I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada. So we're all in random places here today.
There you go. There you go.
So I guess here's a question that I think might be on the top of a lot of people's minds. It's sort of opinion, but you can also obviously introduce facts if you have them. But I guess the question here is, do you think all of our jobs will eventually be obsolete because of artificial intelligence? In other words, should we all be? I know you mentioned before the power of words and the fear that comes with that, but is there are people rightfully concerned that their jobs might be automated and therefore might be at risk in the future?
Well, I would ask, what is your job? Like, what are you doing that would be 100% replaced by AI? That's what I would want to know. You know, from a doctor to a lawyer to a consultant to a restaurant owner, there's always an aspect of value added versus non-value added activity. So what part of your job do you feel would be obsolete if AI does come into your organization? I mean, that's, to me, I don't believe people will lose their jobs. I believe their skill sets will shift. I believe that they will have a larger portion of quote unquote that value added activity, the greater sense of what they do as a profession, so they can really focus their time and their attention on what they're paid to do. You know, let's not kid ourselves here. We are paid for what the customer is willing to pay us for. That's the definition of value added activity. If a client is not going to pay me to spend 20% of my job fiddling through spreadsheets or collecting data or, you know, what have you, then what value does that bring to me, to my job, and to the organization? So I have to be very cognizant of, what do I do in my job every day that I need to increase my value. And let's just say you looking at yourself, maybe expanding into the market. What does the market need? What do I need to improve upon myself to become more valuable in the marketplace? I think that's what people should really be asking, instead of, am I going to lose my job? And again, lose my job has that negative connotation, right? So why don't we shift to something more positive on, okay, what about my skill set do I need to improve to become more valuable or become more desirable in the marketplace, or even in my own organization? Maybe it's my Sally Sunshine trying to come out from all this grayness, but I don't like to focus on the negative so much, because I know how detrimental and powerful in a negative way that could be to a person in an organization. You know, that little seed of negativity, of you know, darkness, it kind of grows. And I don't believe people really want to be in that space. So instead of thinking, okay, I'm going to lose my job, flip it and say, what do I need to do to be more marketable, to have a better skill set, to improve my skill set, to grow within my industry? Or maybe I want to, you know, do something else. What is it that I want to do in particular that'll bring more value and more satisfaction to myself? I don't really like that, you know, I'm going to lose my job. There's so many other things that we could be focused on to improve our personal standing, as well as our standing in an organization, that we should, I know the questions are going to be asked, but again, that comes from a place of fear. What do I need to get out of that to create a space of abundance and happiness? And again, it's a little fuzzy bunny, I get it, but we're people, we're not machines, right? We need to have the balance.
Yeah, exactly.
It's probably not what you were looking for, but
no, it's a good, that's exactly what I wanted to get at, is I think there tends to be fear of technology in general, not just AI, but technology in general. I think there's a general fear that people, you know, you mentioned earlier how in the absence of information and clarity, people will create sometimes a worst case scenario for themselves, their perceived scenario for themselves. And so that's why clarity of what people's jobs are going to look like and how their contributions are still going to be valued and how they're going to use these new technologies, all that clarity has to be there, or else people will revert to the negative at times.
100%. And then you're going to have, you know, people protesting and, pitchforks everywhere. So, and again, it's interesting to me how people think when they receive a message. It's instinctual when I look at someone and I say, okay, did they receive it in a positive way or in a negative way? And that really helps me as a change management professional to scope my next step and message, right? Because I have to address the way they receive the information. And unfortunately, I think we as a society have been conditioned to embrace a negative emotion or a negative message and run with it versus let me help you to see the positive and how you can be successful. Oh, you're full of it. That's not true. Anything with positive reinforcement or that type of messaging is really met with more resistance, in my opinion, than, oh my gosh, the world's blowing up and you're going to lose your job. And people are like, yeah, you're right. They are. Wait a minute.
Right.
What's going on? So, yeah, it's interesting to me when I hear people and see how they accept messages. It kind of speaks to a little bit of how they think. So,
yeah. Now, if we shift gears a bit and then look at AI and its role in change management as a discipline. So we've sort of been talking about how AI impacts an organization and how change management is so important to help people navigate the changes that come along with AI technology. But if we sort of switch that around a little bit now and look at the change management function and discipline within an organization, how can AI enable better organizational change management? And what are some use cases, or do you have any examples of how that might happen?
So I know that one thing that as a change management professional that I spend a lot of time on is the data analytic piece, right? So within an AI environment, if I were to have that, I would have the data at my hands to make decisions quicker. Because in an organization's time is money, right? So if I know of an initiative that's going to the left sooner than later, I can address that. So the predictive analytic piece of an AI bot or whatever you want to call it, in my opinion, as a change management professional, would be imperative. It would be something that I would use constantly, because if I can identify the problem sooner, quicker, I can identify a root cause sooner and quicker and make those changes, bring the teams in, talk about it, and have the execution sooner, which has a direct link to an impact to the ROI. So that's one of the pieces that I'm really interested in seeing how it would work within an AI environment, is being able to have that predictive analytic synergy for the team members and helping them to understand the data. Because, you want to talk about data, that's another thing people are afraid of. They're afraid of numbers. They don't know how they gathered, how do they get calculated, how do they get used, etc. So if I'm able to bring that to the team as, okay, here's the data set, let's talk about it, instead of, hey, I need everyone to gather the data and we got to figure out how to analyze it, etc., etc. That removes another fear right there. So the data analytic piece to me is going to be one important benefit to change management. Another one is, again, the training and onboarding and the adoption of these digital platforms. I think there's a lot of work that the AI could do to help facilitate the training and onboarding and measure it, and making sure that we're completely, the teams understand it. If there are any gaps in training, I can identify it sooner. Onboarding, there are no holes missing. We can make sure that that program addresses everything we needed to address, and then look at the analytics to see how we're performing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And you mentioned that. Sorry, I'm about to sneeze. Right as you finish
Okay.
your.
I was trying not to cough for the last 20 minutes because I have asthma.
Right as you finished, I was about to hit the mute button and sneeze, and then you finished, and I couldn't quite get to it. So I'll try to hold back the sneeze. It's really dusty. I'm in the desert right now, and there's a windstorm or a sandstorm yesterday, so it's super sandy in the air right now. So I guess you bring up a couple good points. One is that
only a couple. I'm only joking.
Just in that one.
I'm only joking.
But you mentioned how, the use of data in change management. I think those are two words a lot of people don't put together, data,
Really?
change management. And it is a way to make something that's very vague and touchy-feely and hard to understand, that being change management and how people react to change. Data is a good way to sort of ground it, to give it form, if you will. It allows you to understand or anticipate where potential resistance might come from, what the sources of resistance are, how you're going to overcome it. And I think that you bring up some good examples of how data and AI could help us do change management better by collecting better data and responding to better data, understand it, interpret it, anticipate how people are going to respond to changes. All that stuff could be enabled by AI. I think that's what you're saying. Is that fair?
That is fair. That is fair. As well as to make sure that we are using our KPIs appropriately, and we're responding sooner to them. Because when I have my change management initiatives, I make sure that we are meeting at a specific cadence, so a change doesn't go too far down the path and then I discover that it's not working. Like, that's the last thing you want to do, is start to create a behavior that's not working and then have to go back and rip it all up and say, oh, we have to switch gears. So that's another piece of change management that I believe AI will help with, is to be able to switch gears sooner and get to identify those issues sooner, so we can discover the root cause and create action plans to move forward. Like, you don't want to spend 2 weeks and then find out, oops, we're trending the wrong way on our data set. You want to get to it sooner rather than later.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation of change management and AI when we return from a quick break on Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 64. We're here with Theresa talking about the role of AI and change management and how those two disciplines are coming together. And here's a question that's, I'll be honest, it's a bit over my head, but we'll see if you have a better answer for it than I might here, Theresa. And this is from Andre on YouTube, asked the question: which techniques in AI, clustering, regression, or outlier detection is closest to change management? I refer to purposes, outcomes, and fit for purpose. I felt like this question was sort of like what you were just talking about, but I'm not sure. What are your thoughts? Do you have any?
Which techniques in AI, clustering, regression, or outlier detection is closer to change management? I prefer to purpose and outcome and fit for purpose. I'm not understanding what that really means, but yeah. But for me, again, when you look at the data sets alone and how we're performing for change management, okay, my teams are not going to look at that. They're not going to understand regression, clustering, anything like that. They're going to have the data set, and we're going to discuss it and talk about it and say, okay, why is this going this way? I think the points on the data set maybe is what would be a reference to his question, to understand which way are we trending to determine our next steps. Teams don't want to hear that. They don't want to have to go in and try to figure out why, how the data set is moving or regressing. They want to know that, okay, it's not working. Why is it not working? And what do we have to do to root cause it to course correct, right? But that's my job as a change manager, to get the data set to make sure that I present it to the team and we talk about the root cause, like what is causing this out of the different activities that we've engaged in. That's my opinion. So the regression and the clustering, et cetera, those are the way the data is responding and on the graphics or the charts. So I have to interpret it. So I can say, hey team, we're not doing this. It's not trending right. We're not hitting our goal. We're below our target. What do we need to do? All of that mess, or not mess, but all of that work, in my opinion, the AI can help populate and show corrective action or show where it did not perform where we needed to perform. So I'm saving time, and now I have to interpret, and now we have to work on not a root cause, but an action plan.
Right. Yeah. That's a good.
I hope that was helpful, because I am not a data scientist, but you know what?
Yeah, that was
I know enough to be dangerous. Let's put it that way.
So I think you've given my next question was going to be some potential examples or use cases of AI and change management. I think you've given a good example that's very relevant as far as how you can use data and use that to help anticipate and plan and manage for change better. Do you think that so here's as we were preparing for this, or as I was thinking of questions to ask you for this, I should say, one of the things that I was thinking about and fascinated by is I feel like this topic might be the first time where I've had a conversation with someone talking about something that is relevant to people that are focused on helping people through change.
Yeah.
But they themselves might be significantly affected, or there might be significant concern or trepidation about the change. And that is, the whole kind of turning the table now on change management practitioners and saying, now we have a technology that's going to help you do your job better for all of you that are helping other people through change. And so I just am curious, like, what do you think that AI's impact on the change management community will be? And do you think that the change management community, those of us that are focused on this stuff for a living, how open do you think we really are to AI? Is it going to backfire on us because we're the ones that are supposed to support change, but now we're going to resist the change? Or how do you see it?
Okay, so I have an opinion on change managers who don't like change.
Right.
Let me just say that.
Exist, right? There are a lot of them. Or not a lot, but there's a fair amount, I'd say, in the world.
Honestly, from my perspective, I can do the data set, the analytic, and the people piece, and the technology piece. So that's been my career. As a change manager, I know that people are at the core of what I do. So I am not in any way, shape, or form intimidated or have any fear with AI coming to my practice and helping me do a better job. Because now I can focus my time working with Eric or working with whomever to help them move from an area of resistance to the technology to embracing it. An AI program is never going to be able to connect with you the way I can connect with you, because we're people. I think that from change, if a change manager is solely focused on, gathering data, interpreting the data, making charts, I think maybe then we need to talk about, okay, how can we get you to that, next level of your practice? But in my opinion, AI is really going to help facilitate the work between the current state and the future state and understanding how we're performing, so I can really focus my time on Eric or on Kyler or whomever to help move from a place of resistance to how can I do a better job using the technology that we just had implemented. I have no fear.
Yeah. And I'd be curious to see, if there are some that might fear it, even though there's a certain amount of irony in that question, I suppose, that, I'm asking a question about change management people that should be open to change. So in theory, there shouldn't be any real issues, but, again, we're all human. And if in the absence of information or clarity, we're going to at times doubt those perceptions.
Honestly, I think you hit it right on the head with that one. The information and the clarity is how we're going to get over this. I mean, even for myself, I'm learning about AI every day. I don't know enough about it to have my practice, have AI in my practice, because I need to understand how it works. What are what are the benefits? What is the growth? How quickly does the technology improve? All of those things. I don't, honestly, now that I think about it, I don't think I'll ever fully understand it, because things are happening so quickly and they're changing so rapidly. I will never be an expert at that, but I will be able to understand it, to embrace it to the point of use, right? So if you look at the marketplace, Eric, it's exploding and it's changing so rapidly. My point is, we need to get ahead of that and to understand it and embrace it and to use this to help improve our practice and our business. For who? Again, our teams and our end customer. Because we keep having these conversations, not me and you, but people have these conversations about, an organization, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, it is important, but at the end of the day, we have a customer. If that customer does not buy from us, or if they don't use our services, we don't have an organization. We don't have, employees. So we have to make sure that we're looking at AI as, how can it benefit our employees, but how can it benefit our end user, our customer, or, the product that we're providing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good reminder that we should be focused on that end customer and sort of looking at the greater purpose of what it is we do every day and how it affects our end customers.
I mean, I hear a lot of conversations on a lot of platforms, and yes, I agree, employees are important. They are, but our end customer is also important, because if we don't have someone paying the bills to keep the lights on, we have no organization.
Yeah.
So we have to have that balance of what's good for our employees and our culture, but what is going to help our consumer or our customer as well, to keep coming back, expand our market share, to get a bigger piece of that pie.
Yeah. Yeah. And organizations that are going through a transformation, whether it's with AI or any other technology, I think they'd serve themselves well by sort of keeping everyone focused on that. I think that gives you a lot of clarity and direction and purpose, when you're going through a big transformation. But yet, so many organizations sort of turn inward and worry more about, well, what does this mean for me? Or what is this, how does this affect our team, which is important, but
it is important. I mean, I think
the other stuff.
There needs to be a balance there. There is a duality there. But again, at the end of the day, happy employees, productive employees create a better product for our client, or better experience for our client. So how does AI really fit into that? How are we going to tap into the power of that to create the experience, reduce the non-value added activity to produce a better service or product for our client?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess longer term then, how do you think, do you have any opinions, or have you read anything interesting in your research that would suggest how AI will affect the whole discipline of change management in the longer term?
So the one thing that kind of sparked my interest, and number one, is the fact that it's a tidal wave coming and you can't ignore it, no matter where you try to hide. It's coming, so embrace it. Right. But number two is really being able to focus on my practice, as opposed to focus on that data piece, becoming, there's a lot of time in that. So if I'm able to have my AI monitor alerts, et cetera, the pulse of my project or my initiative, and then I can really focus on root causing it and getting action plans going, helping the teams understand, creating the culture of embracing what we're doing. I would rather spend my time doing that than having to research pull the data, put it in an Excel or whatever, and create this and create. I would rather spend my time working with the people that are actually doing the job than gathering the data for the analytic.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'd be curious to see how that changes or how quickly that evolves and gets adopted by the change management community and by organizations in general. I'll be curious to see how, just if we step aside from change management and user adoption, just how will AI be embraced or not, by organization.
Well, even when we had this conversation earlier, people are thinking change management is, a fuzzy bunny with a rainbow and we're all singing Kumbaya. There's so much more involved in that, monitoring and creating those action plans and finding root causes. So all of that, I believe maybe I could spend a little bit more time doing the fuzzy bunny and rainbow stuff. I don't know, but if we're able to use AI in a productive, positive way to help create a better experience for our clients or employees, I'm all for it. Like if I could spend more time with like Eric and Kelly and Kyler and in helping everyone to kind of move towards the change with greater ease and higher adoption and usage, and I can help show you the benefit of what we're doing as opposed to spending my time on the data analytics or developing those training platforms or onboarding or communication where it's more automated, then I can spend more time, in my opinion, in an area that I'm being paid to do so.
Right.
I bring more value to you if I'm giving you more of my expertise to help your teams move towards the change.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it kind of gets back to not being afraid of it and embracing it. It's easier said than done for many parts of an organization, but I think as leaders, that's what we have to do.
Absolutely. And that's really intriguing to me. Like, I would love to do a case study or something around that fear-based decision-making. It's so interesting to me how people go for that first as opposed to the benefit or how it can help an organization or a team. It's just that psychology background of mine. I'm just like, why?
Yeah. Like when you think about AI, why is it that, or any sort of automation, why is it that people, and it's not all. I mean, I think some people within an organization might be excited about any sort of change. They just like change. They like excitement or whatever. But then there's other people within an organization that, you're right. It's sort of like if you leave them to their own devices, they're not going to default to, this is going to be awesome. It's going to be great. And you imagine all the possibilities. They're going to default to, this is going to suck. It's going to be different. I'm not going to like it. They're going to take away my job. This is just corporate trying to jam new technology in my throat again, just like they always do. You sort of like a negativity that sort of creeps in. But I think it's, if you leave an open void there and you leave people too much room for interpretation or to decide for themselves what they think the future is going to look like. Some might be positive, but others might be negative. And a lot of times the negativity will sort of outweigh or take over the positivity that might exist within that same team or organization.
Yeah. So back to your other point of what a change manager can do to help use the AI. I think one of the things that they can do is to understand what AI is and the benefits of it. So unless you research it like I've been doing and understanding what it means and what it can do for yourself and your own practice, as well as your organization, your clients, I think that the industry won't embrace it because they won't see the value, which goes back to your earlier point of clarity, messaging, and understanding. You have to provide that because you're going to fear the unknown. It's human. It's what we do. We fear the unknown. And until we understand what it really means and how it can really help us, there will be resistance to it.
Yeah, it's a good point. And with AI, it being a newer emerging technology, there's a lot that a lot of people don't know, ourselves included. You and I and others on our team don't know everything there is to know about AI. And there's a lot we're still learning. And so, every organization, that's probably true. There's going to be new technologies that they just don't know a lot about. So that just further fuels the need to provide the clarity that we can to counter some of that.
100%. And again, as I stated earlier, this is coming. It's not like a flash in the pan. It's coming. So we have to be ready for it when it does hit. And we have to be at the forefront of these types of initiatives to be successful. It's not going to go away. It's just not.
Yeah.
Just like
Agree.
the cell phone, it went from like, this big to this big. It's happening. It's transforming. It's happening. So let's do the smart thing and figure out what it means and how we can use it to our advantage.
Right. Absolutely agree with that. And that's actually a great way to kind of close it up or to summarize the whole conversation is, and those are good words of advice for any sort of change initiative, not even just AI related stuff. But well, I want to thank you, Theresa, for bringing life to a topic that a lot of people don't know a lot about. And there's a lot I learned here today. So I appreciate you having the conversation with us here today. There's really good stuff, very interesting stuff too. It's sort of a cool combination of two total opposite disciplines. They really couldn't be that much different. Change management and data-driven AI. But they don't need to be that different. There's a common ground there that needs to converge in order for this all to work. So I want to thank you for your time and for being here today to discuss. Okay, thanks, Theresa. Good stuff. Really interesting conversation, very different than anything we've talked about before on this show. Kyler and I will have some follow-up questions or discussion points based on that conversation. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
Hello and welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 64. And we just had a good conversation with Theresa talking about artificial intelligence and change management. What were some of your thoughts or observations related to that conversation, Kyler?
Yeah, I thought that it was very interesting that our top change practitioner opened with some data. And that's why I always love talking to Theresa, just because she just has such a well-rounded background of understanding, from really technical things like business processes and data science to also understanding holistically the change management. But referencing that 48% growth rate of AI in organizations from 2022 to 2028, I thought that was a huge statistic, but definitely something that is so important. And I wanted to kind of dig in just a bit with you of how do organizations prepare for this tidal wave of change that is coming. It feels like I felt like very Game of Thrones vibe there, like winter is coming type of thing when you guys were talking about it. Right. So what are some things that organizations can do to kind of prep for this new frontier?
Well, I think, first of all, the word tidal wave, you have to take with a grain of salt. I mean, I think, it is a trend that's building steam, and in that sense, it is a bit of a tidal wave. But in terms of how organizations adopt it, they can define or create their own timing for when they adopt AI or any other sort of technology for that matter. So I think a lot of it is just, educating yourself and understanding what AI is and what some of these emerging technologies are, and really being prepared to think about and to articulate how the technology will affect your organization, and really providing that sort of clarity of job roles and future state job design, all that stuff. That's probably the best way you can prepare, is just to educate yourself about the technology and then build the change competencies you need, either externally, or both, to be able to adopt to these technologies as they become more ingrained within your organization.
Absolutely. And I really felt like the impact on that ROI or the understanding, and that can be, a huge issue when it comes to actually implementing these new technologies and just understanding the definition of AI. So I'm wondering, as a company leader, how can you better educate yourself as to what is AI? What will it do to my organization? And how do I make sure that I'm, bucking this trend of any sort of misunderstanding in communicating to my overall workforce, how this will enhance their job as opposed to make it obsolete?
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, is just thinking through how technology will fit within your organization is sort of the core fundamental part of that is just having a clear vision and definition of how technology is going to fit within the organization, how it's going to affect your business processes and the change management side of things. So I think that's more than anything, and sort of back to your earlier question too about how do you prepare for it. I mean, that's really the best thing you could do is to define that future state and to take your time to do that, because the better definition you have, the better clarity you have around that future state, the easier, not easy, but easier it will be to manage and migrate people through the changes.
Yeah, and I have to assume that it would be helpful to reach out to an expert as well, right? And helping you kind of set up like, hey, we've already taken an organization through in your industry through kind of this new technology and change. So let us, scale some of those best practices and those proven methodologies to you. That sounds like to me, if I was, a CEO of a business, and I'm like, okay, how do I understand this? Then that would be kind of my first step. So,
Yeah, just get help from people that know this stuff and have
right.
been through it before and have helped other organizations like you through similar types of changes. That's probably the best thing you can do to prepare and to have the support you need to get through the transformation.
Yeah, and protect your investment, right? That's kind of that insurance piece of, okay, we purchased this new technology, but we aren't sure we really understand what it means for our organization yet. And instead of learning from costly mistakes, I assume a lot of times that can be an investment up front to say, all right, let's get someone in here that knows what these changes will look like and will help us clearly communicate that so impactful purpose or showcase that proof that Theresa really referenced of like how prove it, how will this help my job, and create that assurance within the overall workforce.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That is a good way to look at it.
And I also liked how you guys discussed like when you are experiencing this change, you have that opportunity to say like, okay, what don't you like about your job? What are some of pain points that you have, and almost approach it from that perspective of, hey, like as a business leader, I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to better understand your experience and then implement technology that will allow you to kind of take some of these hardships out of your job. It's almost like a Jedi mind trick, if you will. That sounds a bit disingenuous, but I think it's a great way to kind of approach it as opposed to saying we're doing this and
Yeah.
understanding the employee from the get-go of the project. So I thought that was a really interesting perspective too.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a forgotten perspective, but it's also one that needs to be balanced. You've got to have balance between, you obviously want to listen. I totally agree with what Theresa was saying there as far as listening and understanding and empathizing. That's all really important. But there are times, and I guess this is where sort of foreshadowing the conversation with Adam on project leadership. But this is where at times you do have to have sort of that strong leadership that says, look, I know you think your job should look like this, or you don't think your job should include these tasks or whatever, getting that input, but then recognizing where to, you hate to say it, but to selectively agree with and pursue some of that input, and then knowing where to selectively disagree and say, well, that's not consistent with where we're headed as an organization. So let's sort of provide more of the top-down direction or top-down communication on what that's going to look like. So sort of a balancing act that's tricky and it's hard, and it's part art, part science. But I think that's an important thing that good leaders need to do, is they do need to listen and empathize, get the feedback on what the jobs could and should look like in the future. But they also have to provide clarity of, well, this is what our vision is, and this is where we're headed as an organization. And sometimes those two things don't match up completely. And so as a leader, you sort of have to power through those, decisions and navigating that.
Absolutely. And I think that is just a great overview of why Adam and Theresa are such great peers. Adam is a project manager by trade and has, very little tolerance for sometimes more of our fluffy side of the
All right.
business. And Theresa has just such a great understanding of why those things are important. Not that Adam isn't a great change practitioner in himself. He really sees it from the lens of the data, which is what AI is, right? Is giving you that opportunity to make decisions and understanding the overall human component. Theresa really is excellent at really helping businesses through that. So we have a very diverse director tier here at Third Stage, and I think that's why our approach works so well, because we really assign the right personality and team tailored to the client work, as opposed to what resources are available. So that's kind of our unique approach. Within that, I like how you kind of said there is a balance between that, and thinking about kind of AI in that more disciplined data perspective. I thought it was really interesting how she referenced, really time is money. So having those resources available and more clear and understandable through AI, and using that data as a resource to make effective decisions is definitely
Yeah.
so important.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And it's not something you always think about, when you think about change management. A lot of times you don't think about data at all, let
Mhm.
alone data to the extent that it can support artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. And again, in that perspective of that as an enhancement to the business, right? Having those abilities to automate certain role functions, or even to measure the perspective of the organization and create um, metrics behind things that typically aren't a hard science, like culture, that can be moving and difficult to understand, and isn't just a report you can run off of a system. But that's what AI is, to align and adapt with those strategies that can really help to bring actionable enhancements to the business. So definitely a really interesting piece there. I loved how you said have the tables have turned, our
Yes.
change practitioners, which is a very interesting question. A lot of times, they haven't in these methodologies built out a huge piece of how do you utilize data. We talk about it a lot because we want to showcase the value of change management to our overall audience and community here at Third Stage. But so I want to ask you the same question. Like, do you think that this, in your entire career as you've spent as a top thought leader in change management, do you think change managers are going to be able to embrace AI and new technology like they really practice what they preach type of approach?
I don't know, honestly. I really don't. In fact, I'm fascinated and curious to find out. I think you'll probably, have a mixed result, I would think. You're going to have some that are super excited about it and embrace it. And then you'll have others that, despite the irony of the fact that they're change practitioners and they themselves are helping organizations through change, they themselves resist and fear change. I'll admit I am one of those people. I resist change. I might be one of the more stubborn, difficult to change people in the profession. Maybe that's why I don't do it as much anymore. And I have other people that are better at it, like Theresa. They can do it. They can do it for us. But I think you'll find, I think you will find that it's probably a mixed bag. But I will be really curious to see it. But I think more than anything, though, um, despite the fact, or despite the question of whether or not the change industry or the change practitioner field openly accepts the whole concept of AI, I think the bigger change thing that's happening here, in the bigger underlying opportunity, is to really use more of a data-driven approach to change
Mhm.
management. And Theresa was talking about, I forgot her exact words, but unicorns and rainbows and
Fuzzy
puppies,
bunnies. I wrote it down.
fuzzy,
Yeah.
fuzzy bunnies. So she's talking about the fuzzy side of change. And she and I, the part of the reason she's on the team, and part of the reason that I really wanted to hire her when we first hired her, was because she and I have very similar views of what change management is and should be. And, she does focus on the data-driven aspects of it, or the tangible aspects of change. And I think that's something that we as change practitioners can learn from, whether it's with AI or not. is just looking at things from more of a data-driven perspective, not just a human, emotional fuzzy bunny perspective. You have to converge those two things and bring it all together.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, as she said, you have a customer, and that's the reason that you're an organization. So understanding how that enhances the customer experience and ultimately drives additional business or retention, those types of things. So I think that I like how she always brings it back full circle of, we have a job to do at the end of the day, and it's to make sure that we are clear of how do we create more money, more revenue for the organization, while understanding that there can be disruptions with new technology, and how do we make sure that we mitigate any of those risks of losing money from a baseline perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep,
Well,
makes
great
total sense.
conversation. Yeah, definitely great conversation with Theresa. She did do a great overview of change management for our recent Digital Stratosphere event, which is available on our Third Stage YouTube channel. And you can also still go to stratosphere2022.com and actually register for the event and see the on-demand replay of the entire conference, which she had two different she did one keynote, and then she also was on a panel about business intelligence, which we recently had on Ground Control as well. So definitely check that out for more from Theresa.
Yeah, absolutely. Good resources for sure. So thanks for sharing those with the audience here. And we're going to shift gears a bit, although not terribly so.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of overlap here, or some similarities with what we just talked about with AI and change management. We're going to shift gears now and have Adam Cheatham on the show, who's also a director of strategy and transformation at our U.S. office. And he is going to talk about project leadership in digital transformation and some of the things you should be thinking about and some of the characteristics you look for in good project leadership within transformation. So this is something you'll want to listen to for any team member, really, that's on a transformation, but especially if you're a leader or an executive within an organization going through a transformation. So we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have Adam Cheatham on the show. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 64. My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm excited for our next conversation here between Kyler and Adam Cheatham to talk about project leadership in digital transformation. And this is actually a conversation that we that Kyler recorded for our sister podcast, which is called Digital Stratosphere. Be sure to subscribe to that channel as well, or that podcast as well, if you don't already. Just so you know, the Stratosphere podcast is typically more of a short form, bite-sized segment sort of format versus the longer form freestyle approach to transformation ground control. So be sure to check out that podcast if you like the 15 to 30 minute episodes and bite-sized chunks. You can find that on all the same platforms that you find transformation ground control. So that all being said, let's play you this clip from Kyler and Adam talking about project leadership in digital transformation.
Well, we're really excited, to dig into this project side, and I want to take it from a few different lenses when we talk about how you structure a client's internal leadership team, and then also how you support on the actual third-party consulting side when it comes to things like vendor management. So can you give us just a baseline to start out about what a project leadership structure should look like for your clients?
Yes. So a couple of things come to mind when I hear the question, what is project leadership structure? And the first thing that comes to mind is that leaders come in all shapes and sizes at all different places in the organization. So what you really want is a project structure full of leadership. And it goes it starts at the top and it kind of rolls its way down, where you have a steering committee that everybody involved in a digital transformation project is accountable to. You also have a project sponsor who is accountable to the steering committee, and the project sponsor becomes the single executive level lead on the project itself. This person is usually the one that's the closest to the project by nature. In an ERP implementation, for example, depending on the organization, this could be a CIO, this could be a CFO, it could be a COO, just depending on what it is you're trying to get out of this project. And this sponsor tends to be a part of the steering committee as well. This person's role generally tends to be the conduit between the executive leadership and the project team itself. Project team should have a number of different roles on it. Number one role is going to be program management, however you want to title it. There may be multiple people fulfilling this role depending on the complexity of your project. But what you're looking for is somebody who can facilitate the completion of project activities in this space. You'll likely have a project manager from your software vendor. You'll likely have a project manager internally, and you may have other project managers depending on how many other vendors are involved, at which point we start to think about program management, which is that leadership position that helps make sure all the projects are playing nice together. And then the last role that's worth talking about in a leadership position from a project structure that's common is the project core team. That is usually a group of subject matter experts who will be dedicated to the project itself. What you're looking for in a good core team member is leadership qualities across a multitude of functional areas. In a full-blown ERP implementation, we're looking at finance, we're looking at production planning, demand planning, and MRP. Sales is usually involved, of course, customer service. Depending on how many functional areas you're covering in scope, you should have a core team member who can stand in place in each of those areas to make decisions along the way throughout the implementation and the project itself. They should also be somebody who knows the other people in the organization, the subject matter experts, to say, hey, we need Jimmy for this conversation because he's the one that does that every day. At the core team level, you're looking for folks that are considered leaders in your organization. This is one of the harder decisions to make in an ERP implementation because those are usually some of your best people who are indisposable in their roles. And what we're asking to do is to remove them from those roles and put them in a different position. People usually look to those kinds of folks for coaching opportunities. Hey, what do I do here? What do I do there? And you're looking for a positivity in that. I like to also recommend one other leadership role, which is change agent. And you're looking for leaders in the organization that can convey a positive message about how the project is going, what the purpose is, and engage the rest of the organization who may not be directly involved so that they know what's going on, how the change is going to happen, those types of things. So leadership happens at a lot of different levels within a successful digital transformation.
Absolutely. And that was a lot of really great information. So if you don't mind, let's unpack it just a little bit. So can you kind of differentiate the steering committee that you mentioned and their roles and responsibilities, or who might be an example of who would sit on that committee within the organization? And then maybe compare that to the ERP core team. How are they different and how do they collaborate?
So your steering committee is all top level executives, at least in a typical ERP implementation, and that's appropriate. Your CEO, COO, CFO, CIO, that C-suite is very often the steering committee. You may also, depending on titles within your organization, have more like department heads, directors, vice presidents, whatever their title is. You're looking for the executive leadership in the functional areas that are going to be impacted by your implementation. So when somebody goes and talks to them and says, hey, this somebody on this project team wants me to start spending 20 hours a week on this. That sounds ridiculous. That steering committee sponsor or the steering committee member can say, actually, that is what I want you to do. I want you to spend 20 hours a week on it because it's that important to us. It's that type of a person and decision-making position that is what we look for in a steering committee member. Ultimately, what happens at the steering committee level is you have the major project decisions that are made by this committee. Should we customize this software system? Should we add scope and budget to this ERP implementation? Do we need to bring on a third party for this or for that? Those types of questions. And then the most important question of all, which is your go no go decision. Are we going to go live? We're ready. Everybody says we're ready. Here's what they said the risks are. That should be a steering committee decision that's made in a joint fashion to say, all right, we all feel comfortable with this. Let's do it.
And then when it comes to the ERP core team, it sounds like they're more on the execution level as opposed to the decision making as around strategy.
That's exactly right. So these are folks that are living and breathing this stuff operationally day in and day out. They know what it looks like on the floor. They know what it looks like in the office, and all of the operational things that will be coded into and configured in your ERP system. They'll be heavily involved in facilitating the design and the configuration of the system.
And would those only be, say, IT folks, or what would that look like as far as the different stakeholders involved in that conversation?
That's another great question. They would be from the business side. We heavily recommend your core team not be staffed entirely by IT folks. It's not uncommon for especially larger organizations to have a team of business analysts in IT who are responsible for each functional area. These are not the people you want on your ERP core team. You want the people who are actually doing the jobs. The people that your IT business analysts are going to go ask all of the important questions to. We want those people on your core team because this is a business project. This is a business transformation, and the decisions that impact the scope and nature of the project should be made at the business side of things.
So these stakeholders not only sound like subject matter experts, but also leaders. And it seems like if you're an organization going through any sort of technology implementation, that might kind of hurt to take those people out of their day-to-day operations. So how do you kind of move through that transition without any huge disruption for the overall business?
You just kind of had to take it one step at a time. Mostly, what we like to recommend is backfilling roles so that the people you're going to lift out of the organization and put into this project have the space and time to do it. You also want to get really, really refined on how you're scoping the number of hours you need a week from them, and your system integrator and other third-party partners like Third Stage can help walk you through what that looks like. Whereas it's an eyes wide open conversation on how much time do we need of each individual core team member, and at which points in time, because sometimes that's heavy, sometimes it's lighter, and it can vary by functional area. So talking through it, knowing what that is, and thinking of it about in a lot of ways as a role as opposed to a person. Like I need a finance core team member. That's a role, not necessarily an individual person. So you might split it, right? You might have, the payable side and the receivable side. You might have the two of them to minimize the impact. You do want to be careful not to have too big of a core team. Most organizations, 6 to 8 is the right number of people for that. So you don't want to get too big and have too many cooks in the kitchen, but at the same time, you want to be able to provide some flexibility for the people that matter most to your organization.
And that's all excellent advice. What is some red flags or some mistakes you've seen that organizations that you've worked with have gone through when setting up their project leadership team that could be avoided?
The first is having a core team that's too big. I've worked with core teams of 12 to 16 people, and they're just paralyzed by inactivity. Everybody wants to make a decision for their functional area, and you stop seeing things as holistic and you start seeing them in silos, which very quickly devolves into combat situations, like us versus them type of mentality. And that's not productive, and it's not indicative of good leadership. Other things that we fall into is not having the right people. Is to say that our most important people must remain in their chairs and put somebody else that would be less than desirable in the core team project not only waters down the impact of the project itself. It makes it seem like if you can't put your best people on it, it must not be that important. But it also puts you in a decision where somebody's gonna be responsible for making decisions for your most valuable people, and those most valuable people may disagree with that path because they know more about what happens on the inside and outside. So having the right people, and really dedicating to putting the right people on the team is another key component of that. The last thing is for a third thing that is a common mistake in the core team, at least as I see it, is just saying, well, that person's already working 40 hours a week and we're going to do this implementation project. So now I'm going to ask them to work 60. That type of hero mentality that is, let's pile on our best people. An ERP implementation shouldn't become a punishment for good work. And it will be seen as that if you just pile it on, because implementations are hard. They take a lot of time and thought. And the last thing you want is the 20 hours a week or whatever it is you need from that core team member to be the least efficient 20 hours of their week, because their hours 41 through 60, as opposed to having an opportunity to really dedicate themselves to the project.
I'm sure that's a really relevant piece of advice right now as we go through kind of this great reshuffle and our labor market is challenged.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, I'm going to ask Adam some questions about how third stage or third-party vendors and partners help support that leadership team.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation talking about project leadership in digital transformation. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling, the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we recently hosted our Digital Stratosphere 2022 virtual event. It's 3 days of packed content related to digital transformation best practices, about 16 or 18 different workshops and different speakers that are presenting on different topics, everything you need to know about transformation. The bad news is if you missed that event, the event's over. The live event already happened. But the good news, if you've missed it, or even if you did attend it and you want to see replays or you want to catch the sessions you missed, you can do that now by going to stratosphere2022.com. Go to stratosphere2022.com, register. All you have to do is put in your name and email address, just a few fields. You get immediate access to all the recordings, and the recordings cover everything from digital strategy, software selection, organizational change, process improvement, architecture, data migration, cloud, trends in the industry, how to avoid failure, some of the legal aspects to think about, contractual aspects to think about as it relates to your transformation. All that is stuff that you'll get by registering for Stratosphere 2022 replay. And again, go to stratosphere2022.com and you can listen to all the replays of all the workshops that you might have missed at the event. So hope you check it out, and thanks for listening. We'll see you soon.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control. We're here with Kyler and Adam talking about project leadership in digital transformation.
Here talking with Adam Cheatham regarding leadership in digital transformation. So in the first part of the episode, we covered kind of the internal structure of what we advise our clients to kind of arm their leadership team or structure it. So now I kind of want to dig into how Third Stage and other vendors, software vendors, system integrators, all those types of partners fit into that project leadership team. So Adam, welcome back, first of all.
Of course.
So when you are going into this conversation about how do you structure your leadership team with your clients, where does Third Stage fit into that?
That's it's an important thing to think about. The way that I always like to frame it is implementations are a lot of work and they have a lot of jobs that need to get done. And that simply is fact. Where Third Stage fits in is when that list of jobs is longer than the client is capable of handling themselves. It's program management, for example, managing all of your vendors together so that they're all on the same program plan and you have a consolidated plan for the whole ERP implementation. That's a really difficult task. You got to manage your ERP vendor and anybody else that integrates with them, including your IT teams and the existing software. And your ERP vendor is only going to focus on ERP and whatever it is they signed up for. All the other stuff that happens outside of that is your responsibility. And that's a job that needs to get done. So program management and handling all those third-party vendors in conjunction with your ERP provider is a role that needs to happen. We like that role from an independent perspective because it creates a lens of how do I know when this is just hard versus something is wrong, and having an experienced partner in that space we find is really valuable and prevents a lot of heartache later on in the project for being able to say, yeah, that's normal. I realize that it's not what you wanted to hear. But that's normal, and it's going to take a lot of work, and we're going to get through that, and that's fine. Versus what isn't normal, and being able to confidently make good, strong decisions quickly when necessary is difficult to see from the inside out. So an independent third party like a Third Stage is capable of being able to tell the difference between what's hard and what's wrong and be able to counsel you through those types of things.
So do you ever experience clients that haven't done that at the beginning of the project and have to engage a partner like Third Stage in the middle of their implementation or even after a failed implementation?
Remediation projects are always very difficult and very specific to each individual client and their experience through it. We do quite a lot of this. The hardest part is figuring out where are we and how do we get back on track, and then setting an expectation that we've made a move in that direction. Regression to prior habits is a problem in remediation types of projects where we're back on track for now. But the prevailing winds from a change management perspective are, here we go again. They've started up that ERP project again. Now that I'm going to get meetings all over my calendar for the next couple of weeks, but I don't need to worry about that or really attend them because it's going to go away again anyway. That's a really hard thing to confront in the remediation effort. And we want to make sure that we're understanding what type of an impact change management has for those types of projects, because it becomes even more important to double down on that to avoid failing either again because you did already, or avoid failing altogether because that's the direction that you're currently headed in. So it's from a leadership perspective, this is where that change agent role that I talked about earlier can come in and become really effective. It's not typically a role that all system integrators call out as important in an implementation, but it can be quite useful, especially as you're trying to put things back on track.
And speaking of system integrators and software vendors, where do they fit in the project leadership structure, and how should they be viewed in going through any sort of digital transformation?
From a software vendor, and frankly, from an independent third party firm like Third Stage is concerned, they should be considered as extensions of your team that report to your project sponsor. You sign a services contract with these types of organizations. That means they work for you. You also have to understand, though, that from a leadership perspective, their leadership goals are different than yours. Your leadership goals are to create this new digital environment that allows you to achieve all kinds of great benefits and efficiencies and all of that. So we can put our business in on a more modern footing. The system integrators' leadership goals are get the software up and running and maximize revenue. That revenue comes out of your pocket. That's their job. And from a Third Stage perspective, while of course we do, we are a professional services organization, our role tends to be more from a perspective of being able to say what is appropriate decision making and what isn't, and be able to coach and guide through those types of conversations so that those conflicts of interests on the vendor and integrator side are minimized.
Thank you, Adam and Kyler. Good stuff. Great conversation. A lot of interesting and important takeaways for anyone that's going through a transformation, but especially for those that are leading transformations or part of an executive steering committee or an executive team of an organization going through transformation. So when we come back from a quick break, we're going to unpack some of what Kyler and Adam discussed. But first, we'll take a quick break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 64. You can find new episodes every Wednesday on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and all the audio podcast platforms as well. So be sure to check us out there. And so this conversation or this topic of project leadership and digital transformation, interesting conversation you had with Adam. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways after the interview?
Yeah, I wish I would have named it like Digital Transformation 101 because I feel like it's really a great baseline for any sort of not only project leader, project manager that's going through any sort of digital transformation or planning on it, because it describes like what should your internal team look like? What is an ERP steering committee? What does that mean? And then also the second half of the episode is how do partners fit into that and where should they lie on the leadership side? So I think a lot of times we have kind of misunderstandings of like what is an ERP core team, who sits on that, and what's the steering committee and those different things. So I thought it was great how he kind of broke that down for our audience to say, the steering committee is the leadership committee. That's the people that really are the decision makers, and the ERP or whatever technology implementation core team are the people that are responsible for making, the day-to-day decisions and timelines of, the overall project. So I don't know how you feel about that, but I feel as an organization, a lot of times that can be misunderstood about who should be on the steering committee and who should be on the core team when it comes to actually execution of the project.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point of clarification and just a good reminder of, what all these different roles are and how important they all are and how many moving pieces and moving parts go into a successful transformation.
Yeah, and I think from a project manager standpoint, that is the most interesting role I think I've ever experienced in my entire career. Just because you have to really set the tone for the project. We're going to stay on time, we're going to stay on budget, but also have like this deep layer of understanding of, how does this affect the sales team? How does this affect the supply chain team, the manufacturing team? Really having that full lens, and not only that, but capturing it. And it's kind of like a funny backstory. I actually met Adam, we're married, at a different organization where he was a project manager on a project that I was part of from the sales and marketing perspective. And I always remember, like, he would only do 30-minute meetings, and he would literally write down everything that we said. And it always drove me crazy because I'm like, we need more time. And he would always say, no, this is the right amount of time to capture what we need to do today without going down a rabbit hole of what we don't need the system to be able to do. And it honestly always drove me completely crazy. But now, after understanding like the real role of a project manager in these types of new technology implementations, that's really the point, is to be able to capture all of that in a way that keeps the project moving. So I thought that was super interesting, the way that he kind of broke that down.
Yeah, and it clearly couldn't have bothered you that much because you ended up marrying the guy. So,
well, I don't know. I think when we actually had a relationship that we disclosed the organization, of course, his entire IT team were like, what? Because I don't know if you know this about me, but I can be intense when it comes to making sure that the sales and marketing team is moving. And I always am in that perspective of, sales makes money and IT holds me up from making money because they tell me I can't do all of these things with my system. And his job was always to kind of like keep me at bay. So I still, to this day, think they are shocked that that's what
relationship.
Yeah, that we're married and now have 2 children. So it's just a funny turn of events, but definitely something important to understand when it comes to an overall ability to cross collaborate, or just, I would say, maybe cross understand is a better way to look at it. And how third stage then comes in and integrates with the organization, I thought was really interesting too. From that, he'd covered, what does a system integrator do? What does an actual software vendor do? And then what is the benefit or even some drawbacks of an independent consultant, and where should they fit in within the project team? So he really kind of preached what we talk about a lot, is that ERP core team, it's not that they have to be experts in the technology right now, but they do have to understand the strategic goals of the organization. He cited how dangerous it is to have an outside party do like a business case for you or set those strategic goals, because it's not their goals, right? It's your goals as an organization, and understanding how to do that and align is so important, or your project's really not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And that alignment is what gives you, sort of greases the wheels, or gives you the tailwinds to be able to overcome the resistance that inevitably happens in a transformation.
Yeah, and and a lot of times I ask most of our guests this because I think it's a big misunderstanding when it comes to technology independent and agnostic consultants, is that they don't like software vendors or they don't work well with system integrators. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. They're truly seen as partners. Just the agnostic technology consultant is there to consult or be an advocate or even a translator, I would say, for the business to just understand how these different partners support their project, not own it. And I thought that was a well put way. Because a lot of times we can get that misperception that we don't like software vendors because we do, showcase a lot of industry bias in that area, and that's not true at all. So I wanted to get your reaction to that. Obviously you are the first to be that thought leader in the software industry of saying like, well, no, that might not be correct, or those types of things, and kind of just explain from your perspective how you do partner with software vendors. That's part of our role.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line between partnering with and collaborating with
Yeah,
software
that's a
vendors,
good point. Yeah.
which we do, and that's something we're good at. But the reason we're different, and it's a really important but subtle difference, is that we're not compensated to toe the
Mhm.
company line as it relates to software vendors. So in other words, we're not there to promote certain products or to
Mhm.
force technology in general down anyone's throat, because either it fits an organization's strategy and direction and that they're trying to go on their roadmap and all that stuff, or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then we're not going to try and force it. We're going to find the best technology or technology solutions, not just in the evaluation phase, but also in terms of how we deploy uh, technology throughout a transformation. So not having that economic bias or that financial incentive to push a product is really important, because you want someone that's looking out for you and really only serves one master. In our case, our clients are our masters. That's who we're serving.
Mhm.
So yes, we need to collaborate. Yes, we need to work with vendors. We do that really well. But at the end of the day, we don't represent the vendors. We represent our
Mhm.
clients. So that's an important difference. And those two things are not always perfectly aligned. There are times where there's a conflict between what a vendor wants to do, what a vendor thinks is right, and what's really right and best for the organization. And the reason there's a disconnect is because what a vendor thinks is right is usually what's right for them and what's going to make them money, but that's not necessarily what's going to make you money or what's important to you as an organization. So you've got to sort of reconcile those two things. And that's okay. That's just human nature. And it's also part of the messiness of these sorts of transformations. But
Mhm.
having an independent and technology agnostic advisor to help you through that is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had clients, especially in our more SMB space, come back to us after, they've selected their technology and say, like, I don't understand what the system integrator is saying. And that's totally normal.
Yeah.
So they're asking me for things I don't really get. How do I make sure I do that? And then we come back in more of a PM role to help kind of, again, like I said, translate what are they actually asking for, and to make sure that there's no disruption to the overall business because of a misunderstanding.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's important.
Absolutely. Well, if you haven't looked at kind of the team structure, how vendors fit in, we have a lot of content to follow up on that on both Eric and Third Stage channel as well. And then you're definitely able to reach out to any of our directors that you heard from today personally. They always have their contact information on our YouTube channel, and they're able to kind of answer any follow-up questions that you might have about organizational change management, AI, or project team leadership.
Yeah. Yep. That's good stuff. Be sure to check that out, and be sure to check out the Stratosphere podcast as well. If you
Yeah.
haven't already checked that out, that's the interview, or that's what that interview was from
Mhm.
that Stratosphere podcast. So be sure to check that out. And that's good stuff. So thank you for that interview, Kyler, and for uh, all the great co-hosting that you've done in this episode. And thank you to the audience for joining us here today. And thank you for the great questions that you all have. I really appreciate that involvement. And as a reminder, you can find new episodes every Wednesday on all the audio podcast platforms, as well as YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And be sure to subscribe to the channels too, if you don't mind. It helps us just have a bigger following. And if you subscribe to the channel, like it, share it with your colleagues, get the word out there. That's immensely helpful to us. So we appreciate any support you can give us there on that front. So I want to thank everyone for joining here today. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next Wednesday on the next episode of Transformation Ground Control.